Hello, everyone. We are going to look at a more sophisticated end game. Recently, we've been looking at some simple endings, not so simple, but just some basic endings. Now we're going to enter into some more practical endings. This particular ending comes from the game Capablanca Tartakover. Capablanca has the white pieces here. It's white's turn to move. And just before I get right into it, I just want to tell you about the players real quick. Most of you know who Capablanca is, so I'm gonna race through that real quick. He was champion from 1921 to 1927, and he lived from 1888 to 1942. Uh, uh, Genuine child prodigy, and something you might not know is one of the books he wrote, Chess Fundamentals, was deemed by Botvinnik as the best chess book ever written. So um, you can take that how you would like. But again, there's a lot that we could say about Capablanca. So just go look him up if you're not really familiar with his achievements. Um, the black player, severely Tartakover, a little less well known, but a very strong chess player. He was born in former Soviet Union, Austrian player, and he had an interest in life. Being born in Russia in 1887, he actually had a law degree, but never practiced law. So he wanted to be a chess player. He wound up moving to Vienna at 17. He served in the Austrian-Hungarian army. After World War One, he became a Polish citizen after the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed. So a lot of people think that he was a native Polish, but he became a Polish citizen later on, and he never spoke the language. Um, Now, uh, he is also one of the fathers of the so-called hypermodern chess school, along with Reddy and Breyer. He wrote many, many books. He's one of the 27 original grandmasters when the title was first introduced by FIDE. Another interesting fact about Tartakower is World War II, he served in the French army under General Charles de Gaulle, and his French colleagues had difficulty pronouncing his name, so Tartakover just changed his name to Lieutenant George Cartier. So there's some interesting tidbits about uh, Tartakover and several opening innovations that he contributed to chess theory. One is the famous orangutan opening 1b4 along with Alexei Sokolsky. Um, there's several variations in Queen's Gambit Decline, uh, Tartakower variation in that, and I think Carol Khan, several openings. So a very strong player. So here we have this position here, and in these type of positions, you definitely have to be able to analyze a chess position. I have several videos like that on the channel, just showing you how to analyze. There's many different ways to approach it, but um, they all lead to similar conclusions when done correctly. Um, so here uh, we have to go step by step. First, of course, you want to look at the king safety, right? And there's no heavy pieces really on the board, no queens, right? Rook pairs or anything like that. So nobody's in danger of getting mated. There's no mating net around the king. So both sides have a equal king safety. Material is very important, right? Does any side possess the greater amount of material? Here, no. Each side has six pawns and uh, and two pieces. All right. The next step that's very important also is direct threats. Is there a direct threat? Right? Is anything about to be captured or like a fork threatened or something like that? Like for example, if this bishop was right here, right? That would be a direct threat. Or let's say this, let's say the H pawn was gone, and this would be a direct threat. All right, something immediate. Okay, for example, if the pawn was on b4 threatening the knight, that's a direct threat. So here in this position, there are no direct threats. There's no immediate capture or loss of material that black or white is facing in this position. All right. So after those sort of obvious observations, then we go a little deeper and we want to look at open files. All right, and we can see right away the E file is open. All right, the rest of the files are semi-closed for the most part. All right, but the E file is wide open, so we can see there's one open file, and then there's several diagonals open on the board, namely F1 to A6, H3 to C8, just to name a few. But we can see that um, the diagonals definitely benefit and assist White's bishop here. All right, and that's something that we would think about later. Step 4 is to observe the pawn structure and to see who has the better pawn structure. Here we have to give black a slight edge here because white has 3 pawn islands. He has the isolated A pawn, then the 2 hanging pawns on the C and D files, and then the 3 pawns on F, G, and H. So we get the edge there to black. Next thing we want to look at is weak and strong squares. What I like to consider, for instance, weak squares are squares in your own territory that you cannot occupy with a piece in a safe manner. So, for example, a weak square in black's territory would be F5. The reason being is if he puts his rook on F5, the bishop, which is of lesser value in this position, would just simply capture the rook. So that's on the black side of the board, but he cannot use his own territory, right? Same with the B5 square, for example. Black theoretically owns that territory because if you draw an imaginary line between the 4th and 5th ranks, that divides the 2 armies, and we can say from ranks 5 to 8 belong to black and 1 to 4 belong to white. But the square B5, for example, cannot be occupied by black because the bishop on D3 and the pawn on A4 control that square. We see the same thing on G5, also E5 square, right? C5 is contested, right? But again, that's in black's territory, and black only, but at least black can occupy it with the pawn. But certain squares in his own territory, black cannot occupy, period. So we would look at those type of things from both sides. So the white side and the black side. So after we look at the weak squares, we also look at the strong squares for each side. And of course, the squares that are going to be strong for white are usually going to be weak for black. So for example, E5 is very strong for white, but weak for black. All right, C4 and E4 are weak squares for white because the knight, for instance, can occupy C4, but white is not able to occupy C4 at this time in a safe manner without loss of material. Okay, same with E4, right? If bishop to E4, then pawn just takes E4. These would be considered weak squares. And so moving on from there, we want to look at who controls the center. That's pretty much a wash. Both sides control the center, but if you want to give anybody an advantage, you could give a slight advantage here to white because he has his bishop on D3, and so it's contesting the E4 square somewhat, and also he's also prepared to attack the center with C4. But we can say the same thing about black. who can play c5. So the center is pretty much equal, but if you want to give someone an advantage, you can give it to white because he has that pawn, that bishop on d3. The next thing we look at is space. Who has more space? Here it's pretty equal because both sides both occupy the first four ranks. So again, if you want to give somebody the edge, you could give a slight edge to white just because he controls more squares on in black's territory on the fifth rank than black controls in his side of the board. Um, Finally, development. Again, usually this late in the game, development really is not too critical here. All the pieces are out. Most of them are traded off. So we could just call that equal. Both um, sides are adequately developed, although the rook is still sitting on a1. Um, Again, we have to use a little bit of common sense here. Like it's really not detrimental to white's position at this point. However, the next part of that is piece location, which is very important. And we look at the location of the pieces. And here we have to give the nod to white here because the bishop is definitely better placed than white's knight. And although the rook, black's rook is slightly better than white's on e1, um, it's white to move. So if he wanted to occupy the e file, for example, he could do that easily with check. Okay, so I would give the nod in piece location to white here. So again, that's just like a simple way of not going too deep into analysis, but a simple way to analyze these type of positions that don't have direct tactical sequences involved. All right. Now, what do you do after you get all of this information? Well, this allows you to determine who's better. So if you have been listening, you should be able to tell that white is better. Now, is white winning? Right? Is white winning by a large margin? No, but white is better. That gives you the right to play for an advantage. That dictates how you should be playing. If you determine in the position that you are worse, then you know that you can't really play some kind of drastic move or big, piece sacrifice or something like that. It just wouldn't work. It's kind of like Steinitz says, if the position has to call for it. All right. So here, white is a bit better. So you have to play accordingly. So it's white is not gonna just win here in like one or two moves, but he is better. So once you know that you're better, then you can start to play accordingly. Whereas black, on the other hand, being worse, has to develop a plan to start playing for a draw and decide what he must do. So now, looking from white's perspective here, let's talk just summarize why he's better here. So first of all, he has more space and control of the squares, open diagonals for the bishop, right? You can see white's bishop is very good. Okay, black's knight has few prospects. He has this outpost on c4 and e4, but he has to get to him. So the knight has little prospects here. Black's rook again could be traded off, right? As white can play rook e1. And the other thing that I didn't mention earlier in the analysis is that white has this 3-2 pawn majority on the king side. So all of these things are the reasons why white is better. Okay, so now when devising my plan, we want to plan based on our strong points in the position. So you've heard the adage before, play where you are strong, right, and your opponent is weak, right? Don't play where you're weak. You want to play to your strongest points. So analyzing the position, we realize that the strongest features in our position is white, the bishop, okay, the bishop on d3 because there's a bunch of open um, five diagonals for the bishop, and there's a 3-2 pawn majority. So our focus should be revolving around those two features there. Okay, the e5 square is also very powerful, as we have the e pawn and f pawn guarding that square, and that is also a possibility. All right, so with that in mind, there's a few plans we can choose from, and we're going to go over them. I'm going to show you the plan that was actually chosen by Capablanca in the game, and also give you a few alternative plans, and also show you Black's plan also. So before I show you Black's plan, I'll tell you what it is. So analyzing the position from Black's perspective, right? Black is worse and he needs to draw. So what are some of the um, features that Black needs to rid himself of in order to secure a draw? Well, one thing, I talked to you about how powerful the bishop was on d3. So you definitely, if you're Black, you want to trade that knight for the bishop. If you could get rid of that bishop, that would be fantastic. All right. Another thing um, Black could try to do also is try to trade off the rooks, right? That's one plan, and try to go into a pure king and pawn ending where he can utilize his 4-3 majority on the queen side, all right, to offset White's majority. Now, the third thing he can do is try to cripple White's majority on the king side. So, for example, cause a situation where there's split pawns, right? Say, for instance, he trades the pawns off, and there's F and H pawns, for example, or a scenario where the bishop and knight are traded off, and he can play a move like H5, so that when White finally gets G4 in, he can trade, and then you have this split majority, thus crippling the pawns. So those are some ideas for Black to try to draw. So now we're gonna go into the game, and you'll see how these ideas work out. So first, Capablanca played the move H5, very powerful move here. And again, notice how he's playing according to the strong points in the position. He's pushing the majority on the king side, and he's also strengthening and flexing with his bishop here on d3. All right. Tartakover plays the move rook f6. H takes g6. H takes g6, and now the rook comes to h1. And you can see not only now does he has the 2-1 majority now, and the bishop is very powerful, but now he has a rook on the open file, right? And notice how he avoids the possibility of Black trading the rooks. Okay, so he keeps his pieces on the board in this position. Again, this is one plan, and I'll show you a few others. Game continued. King f8. Um, the problem here is there's no way to utilize this rook because this pawn would just be captured. So if he tried to use the rook as like a defend the penetration to the 7th and 8th ranks, the pawn would just drop. Rook goes to the 7th rank. Rook to c6. So we can see Tartakover is trying to get active, and again he's trying to play to his strong points. g4 is the majority. Knight jumps in to c4, so the knight's trying to get active. g5. This not only pushes the majority, but it fixes the pawn on the light square. Knight c4 check. Knight knight e3 check, king f3. Knight jumps to f5. And now the knight's Tartakover achieves his goal of trading the bishop for the knight, but now he goes into um, this rook endgame where white's rook is very powerful. Okay, so it was like right plan, wrong timing because I mean, how successful are you going to be with the opponent's rook on your seventh rank like that? So King G3, Capablanca just simply gives up the pawn because now his idea is just to push his majority on the queen side. Remember that idea we spoke about? That was one of the strong points of Capablanca's position, the queen side pawn majority. And he's just sticking with the plan, even while he's sacrificing pawns. King G5, King F6. Now he's threatening mate. And Capablanca just begins to start sweeping up pawns. And he just went on to win the game material up. So you can see how effective that plan was. And I just want you to know that my analysis based on um, just the position before even looking at the rest of the game. Now we're gonna look at alternative plans, right? To show you that you can choose different plans based on your style, but you're still going to be playing to the strong points of your position always. That's how you're supposed to play. So let's look at this move. Let's say Rook E1 check, for example. Again, let's look at King F8, Rook E5. Notice in this position we're using another strong point in our position, which is the E5 square. Rook D7 again, and now here enters the idea of pushing the majority again. So let's look at this variation. So instead of King F8, let's look at Rook E7. And instead of trading, let's look at Rook E5. In this situation, C6 is forced because the rook is pinned. King F3. Let's say the knight tries to get active here. Bishop takes, D takes, and now King E4. So again, this helps black a little bit because he gets to trade the knight for bishop. And I'm just showing you these alternative variations so that you can see the battle of ideas. King F7, D5, and in this particular position, the white rook is just too powerful. The dominance on the E5 square is too much. And again, you see the idea returning and pushing the majority up the board. And you can even see black trying to push his majority on the queen side, but the white rook is too powerful. And here, white is better also. Now I want to show you an example if white plays foolishly and squanders his advantage and doesn't play like he's supposed to. Say he gets impatient and he allows black to do what he has to do to draw. So for instance, he plays Rook E1, Rook takes, King takes, King F3. C5, takes, takes. And we can see in this position, it's a little more difficult for black here. Now, at least white still has this bishop versus knight scenario, and he still has the majority on the queen side, on the king side rather, going, but it's a little more difficult here. So going back in this variation after the rooks are exchanged, let's say king f3 again, and let's say it's immediate knight c4, but let's say here black, um, or let's say rather white plays just f5. Right, he's impatient. He goes for it. So now knight bd2. F takes g6, of course. It's a little trap. Don't take. You can't take the knight there. Right. H takes g6, and now bishop b5, protecting the pawn. King d6, king e3, c6, driving the knight away. Bishop d3, and now again black gets what he wants. Knight takes d3, king takes g3. And here we can see the king and pawn ending, where this is basically going to be a race, but most likely end in the draw, save like some blunder from both sides, because here black has what he wants. He's pushing his majority versus white's majority, and it's gonna fizzle out to a draw because white is not going to be able to use his king to assist those pawns because he has to keep his eye on the black pawns, and vice versa. And again, we can play around all day with different scenarios and different variations in the position. But suffice it to say that um, the point has been made that black again is in a worse position. But if white is not careful, black can easily draw the game. So uh, in these type of position, it does take solid analysis and a good plan, because you have to have a plan. If you're just playing like kind of like a robot or whatever, then you'll eventually uh, slip up in the position, and then black will be able to draw. But the key thing to take away in concluding is that one, you have to analyze the position thoroughly. Two, always play to your strong points in the position, right? Sometimes you might have to, you know, use a bit of prophylaxis and stop your opponent's plan, depending on how serious it is, especially if it's some type of king side attack. But you have to uh, most primarily concentrate on what you're trying to do in your position, all right, and not necessarily on what the opponent's trying to do, right? And you saw in this example, very simple play, utilizing the strong bishop, the rook, activating the rook. Now he could have played the rook to the e file. I showed you an alternative plan, but he decided to push the majority, activate the bishop, the pawn majority, and the rook, and use those in combination to dominate the position. And even when black finally got the minor pieces traded off, white's rook was dominating on the seventh rank. Notice the difference too, that um, if white allows his minor pieces to be traded off before the rook is dominating, then the position just fizzles out to a draw. But since he was able to gain another advantage with having the rook on the seventh rank, it didn't matter that he traded off the other minor piece. So I urge you to study this video a few times and go over these variations so that you can understand how the plan was formulated and understand how to make plans yourself. We're going to be looking at several of Capablanca's endings. I'm going to be doing like a series and like really get into these endings so that you can not necessarily learn the end game, so to speak, but learn how to make plans uh, in these type of positions so that when there are no tactics, that bishop takes h7, knight g5, whatever, those type of tactics that you know how to actually make a plan. Um, so if you have any questions, just hit me in the message board, and just check the links below. There'll be some video content related to this video. Um, Also hit the subscribe button to move my and the thumbs up button to move the video up in the algorithm on YouTube. And also please donate to my channel if the video is been of assistance to you. And I'll see you guys on the next video.